With Super Tuesday just a week from tomorrow, the presidential candidates are starting to focus on us here in Texas. And so that's why we invited, of course, the Texas Politics Project expert, James Henson, to talk about what this means this time around, because Super Tuesday is super important for us here in Texas now. Good morning.
And finally coming. Good morning.
Finally. Explain to our viewers why it's so important this time around.
Well, up to this point, the race has been kind of a one state at a time affair, more or less.
Yeah.
On Super Tuesday, we have larger states, lots more delegates, more than a dozen at a time. And so we'll get a much better sense of where the race stands on, the morning after Super Tuesday when we see how many these really literally hundreds of delegates are allocated.
And Texas has a really big role in this primary. So tell me what we're looking at when it comes to the Cruz, Rubio, and Trump fight doing the delegates here in Texas. What's that looking like?
Well, that's obviously the marquee fight in a lot of ways right now. So going into this, Donald Trump is the prohibitive leader almost in a lot of ways.
Wow.
Based on the early contests. Of course, something that surprises, kind of amazes a lot of people. Most of the polling has suggested in Texas that Ted Cruz still enjoys an advantage. But I think we have to remember that Donald Trump is very popular in the country. This campaign has obviously been very successful. And although Ted Cruz is from Texas, Texas is still part of the United States, still subject to the same dynamic that has really seen Trump grow very explosively, really, in the rest of the country.
Yeah, and I think that having Representative Gonzalez back Rubio might play into the whole election as well. What are you thinking?
Well, I think when we look at some of these legislative and congressional endorsements, what we're seeing is a reproduction of a lot of the conflict we've seen in the Republican Party over the last few years. Something like the conservatives versus the very conservatives.
Right.
Ted Cruz himself has also had a lot of legislative and congressional endorsements. If you were watching the returns in South Carolina over the weekend, if you looked right over Ted Cruz's shoulder, you saw the lieutenant governor standing right behind him.
Right there.
So it's all very mixed together, if you will.
And kind of sending a sign, sending a symbol that I have people who are behind me who are from Texas and want me to be the nominee. Clinton versus Sanders, what's that going to look like?
Well, I think the way that we look at this going into Super Tuesday is that this is really Hillary Clinton's moment to try to put some distance between she and Bernie Sanders. The Sanders challenge has obviously been unanticipated as well. He's really given Hillary Clinton a run for his money, but when we look at Texas, several states on Super Tuesday with much larger numbers of African Americans, and in Texas particularly Hispanics, these are real advantages for Hillary Clinton. The real determining point here is, what does Hispanic turnout look like? The more Hispanics turn out, the better it is for Hillary Clinton in Texas.
And I thought that was interesting that Sanders said over the weekend, we just didn't get the turnout that we wanted. We just didn't get as many people registered to vote. The Latino vote here in Texas and the number of unregistered Latino voters is still mind-boggling to me. So are we going to see some of the camps here in Texas knocking on doors?
Well, I think we may, but the time for that was really a month ago. Voter registration is closed now. So it's really a matter now of getting the voters that are already out there. And for Hillary Clinton, that really does mean minority voters. For Bernie Sanders, that's going to be young voters and trying to eat in a little bit to some of that minority vote. I don't expect in a state where Democrats are a bit more moderate than Democrats in the rest of the country. You're going to see Bernie Sanders having an enormous amount of success with that. Nonetheless, that race is much tighter than anybody would have thought. And that's what the polling I think will show as we get closer to Super Tuesday.
The pollings are so important. Those polls, sometimes they're right, sometimes they are so wrong.
Tell me about it.